It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Failing to plan is planning to fail.
Now, I'll be honest. I feel kind of silly putting this one up there because when I was, you know how you have those things that like your parents said to you and it was like an eye roll thing? Mm-hmm. This was an eye roll thing that my mom always said to me. And I was just like, oh, that's like the most cliche thing. And here I am, fast forward 20, 30 years later, and I'm like broadcasting on a live stream, re-quoting mom, but it's so true.
Well, there's a reason those motivational type posters sold so many of them. Mm-hmm. Is because there is there's something there that we ought to all focus on. There's also a famous saying that I love and then we'll kind of talk about the importance of planning, is that just because you say you have a plan doesn't mean it's a good plan. And I think actually the lion's share of people out there probably have plans that could use a little fine tuning. And Mike Tyson kind of sums it up best. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
And what a better way to describe 2020 as just getting punched in the mouth. All of us who have these best laid plans. What's so funny is, and I love this about YouTube, we do these shows now. And in 2019, we were talking about all these ideas and plans and thoughts that we had for 2020. And I love people going in there and like quoting, oh, this didn't age really well. Yeah. This kind of changed a little bit. It's because 2020 was a big punch in the mouth.
It's one of those things where I think a lot of you guys, people wonder, because this is the first like big downturn, bad thing that happened where I actually felt like I was in a position financially to be in the best place I could possibly be. Because usually, think about when I graduated college in the mid-90s. I tried to give myself a little youth there.
Try to make yourself a little bit younger.
I graduated in college in the mid-90s. And I can remember when we hit the dot-com bubble. It was kind of shocking, and I was along for the ride, but I had not been around enough to build the emotional tools, the financial tools to kind of know how to ground myself to take advantage. I know that sounds weird to say take advantage of, but there's definitely plans can do better than others. So if you found yourself, because this is what I would ask you if you were taking an inventory, how did your plan hold up? Did you find that you were reacting? Because that's the worst thing that happened, is that something bad like 2020 comes along, and instead of sticking with the plan that you designed while you were clear-minded, you could take into account all the variables. If you are reacting, you are in the worst position that you can possibly be on it. So pay attention if that is what happened to you. If you found out that, hey, I know cash is trash, meaning that it pays absolutely nothing, but man, I sure would have liked to have had a little bit more of it in 2020 because there were some months where I didn't know if the paycheck was going to be coming in. There were months that I didn't know if I could count on my financial assets that were in the financial markets. There is something to be learned from that situation.
Now, what I think is so interesting is, and we've said this a number of times throughout this year, is that 2020 gave us a really interesting sort of do-over scenario. Yeah. So a lot of folks, the pandemic started, the market started to really fall pretty aggressively in the first quarter. And a lot of folks realized, oh man, my risk tolerance was not where I thought it was. Man, I thought I could be super risky when the market was doing really, really well and making all this money. But when we're down, 20% in a quarter, maybe I am not quite as tolerant of risk as I thought I was. Well, then it recovered pretty quickly. 2020 is shaping up. Looks like it's going to turn out to be a pretty good investment year. If you were one of those people that had to talk yourself off the ledge 3 or 4 times back in March, back in April, this is a great time to reassess as we go into a new year. Where should my risk how much risk can I really tolerate? Was I losing sleep back at the bottom, back when it was really super scary from a financial standpoint in March and April, or was I okay? And if you weren't that person that was okay, perhaps you should revisit how your portfolio is allocated. 2020 has given you a fantastic opportunity to reassess that much more quickly than other bear markets have in the past.
So you're basically make sure the asset allocation reflects your life goals and where you want to be. And if you screwed that up in the past, this is a perfect time, because this recovery was so fast that I think that it hopefully could be a wake-up call, as you described, Bo. So let's talk about how you see some opportunities and make a difference here, too, because there are some financial tools you can employ yourself to make it through the next time. And there will be a next time that the financial markets are stressed, and you once again will be like, wait a minute, I've been here before.
Yeah, the first one, and you just said this, the tool that I think is probably the most valuable in planning for unknown unknowns is cash reserves and emergency funds. I can think of tons of folks I know who business was rocking and rolling. Everything was like going well for them. You know, it was growing and revenue was showing up and all these things. And then something outside of their control, something they had no grasp on, changed that for them. It wasn't a decision they made. It wasn't something they misstepped on. It was something they could not see coming. Well, the ones that were able to make it through well are the ones who had the cash on hand to bridge that gap until they could get back to a new normal. They could get back to doing business the way they need to do.
Well, I think this is also when the contrarian value of cash comes in too, is that a lot of people look at the yield of cash and they go, oh my goodness, it's a horrible investment. Why would I want to keep too much cash? But here's what happens when you have excess cash in a downturn. And I learned this from our favorite successful uncle, Uncle Warren Buffett.
Warren.
Because if anybody has taught us, think about 2008 and all the deals that happened where Berkshire Hathaway was essentially the bank to struggling financial institutions. If you talk about Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, General Electric, I mean, Mars, you know, the food and pet food maker, they were involved. I mean, Warren was writing checks left and right. Because what happens when everybody else is out of cash is all of a sudden lots of opportunities open up. If everybody else is broke and lacking liquidity, if you have the resource they need, it becomes tremendously more valuable. And a lot of you guys might have seen this because you're thinking, that's great, Brian. That's great, Bo, but I'm not Warren Buffett. Sure. But think about this. When the stock market in March and April got its teeth completely kicked in, if you had cash, excess cash, that's a tremendous opportunity. Absolutely. I'm talking about an opportunity that you could be up over 50% in 1 year just by employing that money into investments. So that's an incredible thing. But there's also, when we have, and while we're talking about contrarian opportunities, not only does cash have a contrarian value, what about losses in general?
Yeah, that's a huge point. A lot of folks ask us, you know, folks who are thinking about hiring the firm and becoming clients, they say, hey, well, okay, what were you guys doing back when the pandemic started? And we have two questions. The first is, or two answers. The first is nothing, right? We weren't changing anything as it relates to investment policy, investment strategy, portfolio construction, because when we design portfolios, we want them to be good before the stuff hits the fan, while the stuff is hitting the fan, and then good even after the stuff has hit the fan. But we do take advantage of opportunities like loss harvesting. So as we were in March and April and May, we were actually harvesting losses by, you know, selling one investment that had lost money, buying a similar investment in a similar asset class at the same point, and then writing that back up. Well, from an investment standpoint, we didn't change anything. We kind of rolled the mountain down and then rode the mountain back up. But from a tax standpoint, we have all those losses that we can now use to offset both capital gains in this year as well as capital gains that we might trigger in future years. So it was a huge benefit that volatility afforded us this year.
Yeah, you essentially turned something that was just a paper loss, but you locked it in so it actually had value from a tax standpoint. That's a really powerful tool. It goes right in line with, you probably had some fluctuations in income.
Sure.
When you have fluctuations in income, like I said, we're always trying to figure out how do you turn a negative event into something that can create positive in your life. If you did lose your job, there's potential, or your income went way down, there's potential you could look at Roth conversions. Sure. You could also look at, if you were in a really low income situation this year, zero capital gains. Yep. I mean, I think a lot of people overlook this as part of the new tax code, that the first $40,000 for single individuals, $80,000 for married couples, that capital gains rate is zero.
Yep.
So pay attention to that. Now, here's the bad news. You go over that in income, it jumps right back up to the traditional 15%. But do pay attention. If you're in a unique year, there are sometimes little rays of sunshine that can poke through that dark cloud.
Now, we're talking about some like tools and techniques that you can use. In my opinion, though, whenever volatility strikes, more valuable, I think, than loss harvesting and taking advantage of low tax rates, I think the number one most valuable thing that you can have in your back pocket when volatility hits is the right behavioral mindset.
Right.
Right. If you can set yourself up behaviorally to be doing something that's going to allow you to take advantage of that, you're going to set yourself up for long-term success.
This is kind of like Financial Mutant 101.
Absolutely.
Because this is the thing. This is actually, I think, what was the inspiration for Financial Mutant is that we had a listener who shared with us that when they were making their monthly investment into the markets, they actually got a little excited when markets were down that day. So that's when they realized that was the first indicator they might be a financial mutant, is that on days that they were doing the systematic buys, their autopilot, that when it was down, it was actually somewhat of a celebration. Well, guess what?
Sale.
You can expand that whenever we hit bear markets, pandemics, whatever else we're facing. There will be periods where the market is going down and it just stays down. And you're like, this is horrible. This is the worst thing that could happen. And this is why I always make the example that the strangest bedfellows is financial success and the bedlam that comes from financial volatility is because volatility is actually a wealth creator. And I think people are always shocked by that. You're like, wait a minute, wealth is destroyed when we had bad markets. When things are going down, wealth is being destroyed. But think about this. If you were younger, if you're retiring 15, 20, 25, 30 years in the future, you don't care that we're financially. You care emotionally and everything about your family. This pandemic year, there's a lot of real things you had to pay attention to. But financially, what's going on in the stock market is noise.
That's right.
And it actually is an opportunity for your financial success, because if you're buying through the entire down process, when it goes up, it gets amplified. So we actually have an example to show you, and we have probably one of the biggest periods of just underperformance that we can use as an example to show you how you can turn a negative into a positive.
Yeah, what we thought is, let's not just look at the pandemic downturn of 2020. Let's not just look at the Great Recession of 2008. And let's not look at the dot-com bubble bursting in 2000. But let's go back to the big boy.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the really scary one. And this is the Great Depression. And if you look at this, the Dow, it closed at $381 on September 3rd of 1929. And on November the 23rd of 1954, it closed at $383. So if you just look from a price standpoint, what is that, Brian? 14, 15 years? Did I do my math on that right?
No, you're way off.
25 years.
54. That's like
25 years.
Yeah, that is 25 years.
Trying to go backwards. 25 years, it increased by $2. Right, from $381 to $383.
You're sitting here thinking, I mean, if you tell somebody, why would you invest in the stock market? You realize over the last 25 years, it's only made $2?
We talked about a lost decade. That's a lost
that's a
quarter century. Yeah.
So that's a pretty horrible, but there's more to the story. That's why you just need context. You need a tour guide like your Money Guy family to show you, hey, it's not all thunderstorms and bad clouds outside. There's actually a tremendous opportunity created by this 25-year period where the markets just completely were down.
That's right. If you had a hypothetical $10,000 you can invest each year beginning in September of 1929, the total amount that you would invest if you're just saving $10,000 every year until 1954 would have been $260,000.
That makes sense. That was 25 years plus the initial investment.
If you assume you just let your dividends be reinvested, you're not actually taking the cash, you're just letting the dividends that in this case the Dow's paying, be reinvested. You're letting your money continue to work. At the end of this 25-year period, that $260,000 investment would have turned into a $1.5 million. That's an 11.7% per year total return in a 25-year period where the market only moved up $2.
So do y'all see the opportunity in negative situations? I mean, if you just didn't let the noise get to you, there's actually an opportunity if you just slow and steady wins the race, automate your financial life to where you're systematically buying no matter what happens. What's interesting, I have neighbors, I have friends, and they say, what are you doing? How are you reacting? I'm like, whether the market's up, whether the market's down, I'm buying this time each month. And I stick to it. And and by the way, it saves me so much brain space that I don't even have to think about it. I just know automatically it is going to happen.
That's why I love folks who they'll call and say, hey, things are kind of, I'm a little nervous. Things are not going great. should I shut down my 401k contributions? And I'm like, hey, you look, if your lights are on and you can pay rent and you can put food on the table, don't shut down your 401k contributions, because that is one of the single best ways you can take advantage of dollar cost averaging. If you're someone who's maxing out a Roth IRA and you're doing $500 a month, you say, oh, this market's got me scared. Should I pause for a while? Absolutely not. If you can put together a systematic plan that lets you keep that money going in, no matter what the market throws at you, those most painful dollars that you invest are going to be the most valuable dollars of your entire financial journey.